No, we're gonna be here, but I see.
Oh, Amy's remote.
Amy's remote?
Yep. Look good.
Jim might be remote.
Is that what
Jackets.
you have? You gotta try
And I've been told everyone should use their outdoor voices so that we can. All right, good evening, everyone. This is Lori Charlton's June 4th, 2024. Welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Board of Finance. Call the meeting to order. Ask that we please rise, Mr. McCall, and lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To the members of the public who dialed in or joined via Zoom tonight, you are muted and will not be heard by board members. And there will be no live public comment until called for during the meeting. We welcome public comment on voting items 3 and 4 on the agenda. We'll do that at the beginning of the meeting before the board begins its deliberations. If you're joining by Zoom, please indicate now via the chat function that you would like to be heard. We ask that any comments be limited to 3 minutes. Members of the public are always encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board at bof@fairfieldct.org. And if you write to us, please remember to include your name and address as you would with live comment. So before we move to item 3, is there any public comment? Okay, I see none. So we'll move to item 3, to hear, consider, and act upon the bond resolution entitled a resolution appropriating $5,750,000 for costs associated with the planning, design, and construction related to the Rooster River Flood Mitigation Project, authorizing grants to finance $2.5 million of such appropriation, authorizing cost share reimbursements to finance $750,000 of such appropriation, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance the remaining portion of such appropriation. This requires Board of Selectmen approval, which I assume this passed at today's Board of Selectmen meeting, okay, and requires RTM approval. This is a 20-year bond. I have a motion to hear this item. Mr. Mottola, second. Mr. Curley. Okay, backup for this item begins on page 1 of the posted materials for the meeting, which is the and it starts with the bond resolution. And I will just turn this over to either Mr. Becker, Mr. Gerber to walk us through the item, or whoever else is presenting, and we'll go from there.
Take this, David?
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you.
I'm not.
Yeah, there's going to be, it's Mr. Facilio and I will take this, and then we have bond counsel here as well, if any questions. So you'll notice that the wording is at $5,750,000 in the resolution. However, we are working towards just a change in funding sources from ARPA, which we'll get to later after this, 2.5 million. So the $5,750,000 is immediately reduced within this resolution by $750,000, which is a reimbursement MOU that was already approved and with the city of Bridgeport. However, we need to actually technically appropriate the funds. So that had not been done. So that needs to be done so they can only spend out of it. So we're going to do that within this resolution as a technical cleanup item. And then also there was a $2.5 million urban grant that had several months ago come before the boards. It was accepted, approved, and again, we just need to do the appropriation piece on that. So both of those really just take that number right back down. So don't get hung up on that. The numbers at 5.7 going onto the bonding schedule. So the net comes out to 2.5 million in additional funds, which we're now projecting to be bonded. And again, that matches up with the ARPA 2.5 million, which we'll be asking to reallocate later today. So on the capital waterfall schedule, you have the updated summary, and there's also the change document, which we submitted as an additional backup item. That document, if you walk through the changes, I would just note for anybody who did read through it, that it does include adjustments for how much we actually are planning to go out to the bond and ban for this year. So it is not just the adjustment for the Rooster River piece going on the bonding schedule. That is there along with the projected future 6.25, which is still a conceptual number. We felt it was important at this time based upon looking at all the way down, including a
I'm
contingency.
sorry, can you point us to where on the schedule? What page?
Yeah, so if you look at the summary, not the changes document, but the summary capital plan, it would be on page, let me just.
It's entitled preliminary and tentative discussion purpose only. Is it that one?
Correct.
That's on page 30 of the backup. What do you-
And then give me a second within that, to give you to give you the right page for that.
The backup has the printed page number. It's the printed page number 2.
Well, offline, I think it's,
There's
you're looking at page 36 of 54.
36 of 54.
I think so on the online version. Yeah,
Yeah.
highlighting yellow, we've got the 2.5 million.
But you're gonna go to page 6 of that. There's actually 2 pages. I'm not sure why it did that, but there's technically 2 pages that are labeled page 1. So you're gonna go to page 6.
Right, which is page.
And then you're gonna go to the third line, the second and third line down, which says Rooster River 1 and Rooster River 2.
Yes.
So Rooster River 1, you'll see 5750, but then you'll see other funding sources, 3250, which takes that number down to a net to be bonded of 2.5 million. And you'll see that we moved that out to the fiscal 26. We don't project, actually, we're not going to put that in this issuance. We don't believe by the time the Army Corps gives all their final approvals projected now around the November timeframe. We don't project, at that point, we'd still have to go out to bid for the work and make sure that that we can do it even within this allocation. So that we're not gonna bond now, knowing that we're that deep into when we would even start any amount of drawdown on this. So we've pushed this to the fiscal 26. There is a new line underneath that as well. It's Rooster River 2. We put a placeholder. We just wanted to get, real here about the Rooster River project. So we put a placeholder of 6250. And that brings it as a projected right now number of 12 million for the overall Rooster River. And again, now that one we put into fiscal 27. I do think that at some stage when we get better information, that may actually get spread out a little further. But we did want to at least get a placeholder to say if one of the ways, portions of it might need to be done sooner. And we wanted to make sure to get on the schedule now, because when Rooster River came up, it does predate certainly me and its administration, but our understanding is that these were 2019 to 20 numbers. They were early numbers. They were trying to address certain things, but as they keep uncovering layers of it and trying to address this, it is a bigger project. At the same rate, they've also got numerous grants and other, like the reimbursement piece. So that has at least helped with those numbers. So those are the adjustments for Rooster River.
All right, thank you, Mr. Becker. Mr. Curley.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Becker. That was actually very clear how you laid that out, and I appreciate that you've got the placeholder in there for the estimate. I appreciate that the estimate is nothing more than an estimate at this point, but better something in there than nothing. Just a more general comment, though. I think what we had talked about at some point in a few prior meetings on the capital waterfall, if there could be, if you could have a column added that makes it clear that a number, is the number firm number? Is it at what stage? What's the quality of the number? Like clearly a swag and a best effort is appreciated, but it's good to know that it is a placeholder. You know what I mean?
No, totally agree, with that, and do have that down in my notes for some of the upgrades to this when we come to the Capital Revenue Summit. Just a lot of what's in here, and why we're still sort of marking it as preliminary and tentative. I believe the line in the sand where it's really, where we want to say we've got our stamp that we're truly comfortable with all the different pieces of it is going to be capital, and that's a lot of what the summer is going to be. I know a lot of my time is planning to be shifted towards how realistic are your timelines? How realistic are your numbers? How'd you get to the number? What sort of escalator should we put in the number? And then trying to translate that into some additional, data that's on here.
Okay.
Because a number like that, you're right, should be marked one way, whereas some of the other numbers are actually quite realistic. And as you'll see with the bonding, we were here not that long ago with, a projection in the column of 55 million, but we're actually going out for, we're going out for 33 and then 8 bands this year. So that's roughly 13, 14 by the time everything that's out, less than we had projected. Because there were a number of projects, when you finally go, you talk about it, but then we sit down and we walk through with everybody and say, great, we're actually going out for the money now. We're trying to avoid the pitfalls of all this over bonding that we're doing on the project, what's realistic, and numbers start to fall back pretty quickly. So we're really trying to step up the accuracy, and I appreciate the support coming from this board asking for that is also very helpful, because obviously we ask, but it's, all of us collectively, we need this and we need that. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if, was Mr. Marsilio going to speak on the project, or before we get to that, does anybody have questions on what Mr. Becker had, laid out?
Clear.
Anything else you want to?
I think John Marsilio could give an update on whether it's now or in the next section, but now is as good a time as any, about what's going on with approvals and what the likely timeline.
Yeah, I have to use my big boy
You have to use
voice.
your outside voice.
So this project has been quite an interesting experience. Our consultants originally designed this project in conventional fashion of a flooding detention basin configuration. Signed it to a 100-year flood, which is the conventional design criteria. They got pretty far down the pike with that. And Connecticut DEEP decided that that would not be adequate in this day and age. Required us to design this Fairchild Wheeler piece to a 1,000-year flood. So back to the drawing board. That delayed the design process. Once we got to a certain point, of course, it has to be approved by DEEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers was just slow rolling this for a variety of reasons. They were not. They didn't have the horses to handle post-COVID reviews. And we just recently, after a lot of requests for federal help on getting this done from Mr. Gerber, we finally got them to look at it. Finally looked at it, and the process is 90-day public input. All of these intervals have stretched this process out. So we expect to have final approval from the Army Corps of Engineers sometime in August. Now those approvals come back with comments. And now our design team has to incorporate those comments and resubmit the plans to the Army Corps of Engineers. So, end of September. Look, this ARPA money has to be committed by the end of this year. I have no confidence that these approvals are going to permit us to receive the plans back after their approvals with no comments, put the projects out to bid, receive, and this is a significant project, $5 million, and receive bids back, vet the bids, and be able to commit this money before the end of the year. That's why we're here tonight.
No surprise though. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. Yeah.
So this, can I just, I guess, what question / comments? So this is, given the stage where we're at, it's fair to say that the 5,750,000 is also sort of a broad estimate, right? Because we have to go through all these stages. And so what this bond resolution is doing is it's really just signaling our commitment to maintain the money that was approved under ARPA via bonding. But it's not, I mean, it under other circumstances, it would almost be too early to, I mean, this is a preliminary estimate. We don't know what this number is going to be.
Yeah. So look, we normally ask for bonding before a job is bid out. And you never know what something's gonna cost until it's actually bid. So yes, it's an estimate.
Yeah.
It's a budget. It's the best we have right now. So we can share with you. Even phase 2 is, as you said, it's our best guess.
Yeah, I know. And the only reason, just to clarify, the only reason I'm making the comment is just to clarify that we wanted to do this and approve the bonding resolution at the same time that we took it out of the ARPA schedule, just so to demonstrate a commitment to the project
Oh,
itself.
I get that. Okay.
And to the point of approving things on estimates, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. We've gone down the road with Board of Ed projects where we're approving seed money, getting actual designs and, you know, getting more solid estimates. We have another group of projects that we've traditionally done this way, where we just authorize them in advance and then the numbers will be what they are. And oftentimes that results in changes. So I wasn't even really trying to comment on that. I was just clarifying that the reason we're doing this is we wanted to approve this bond at the same time that we reallocated the ARPA money to avoid any confusion or appearance that we were not supporting this project just because the ARPA money is being reallocated. Right?
May I make a quick comment?
Yes, please.
And I don't know, part of it is because I'm new and a lot of people don't know me in the public maybe, but sounded like there's a little bit of lack of trust. And there was one member of the Board of Selectmen who also was worried that, you know, this body wouldn't approve the bonding for this project if we transferred, and there were members of the public who were concerned that they were going to lose their project and never improve their flooding in that area. Of course, this body seemed very committed all throughout, but it didn't placate, you know, that just saying that didn't placate a lot of people. I think now there's a better understanding, especially because this board did sort of publicly say like you would approve bonding, but now we are doing that so that no one will be worried. And it really is just, a lot of this is just trying to make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, got it.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Curley.
Thank you. So I actually want to take a step back because I'm following this discussion, but I'm not sure those in the public are or maybe. What may not be clear is that the next item on the agenda is to reallocate money from the ARPA funds to different categories. And one of the action items on that list is to defund $2.5 million, I think, from the Rooster River project. What I want to make sure is clear to the public, for the record, is that this action here is to put in place that $2.5 million in the form of bond financing that will replace what's going to be taken away in our next agenda item. Obviously, we want to approve this before we take the other away, but this is not an incremental add. It's just a replacement too. And I'm not sure that was clear based on the discussion that we just had, but hopefully.
We assume that everyone knows what we're talking about. But there's one person, and he's right there, who knew months ago this was never going to meet the deadline. He came to John Marsilio came to my office and said, we should really take care of this because it's like, if just charting it out, this is not gonna, we're gonna lose this money if we wait too long. And you know, we tried to do that a few months ago, basically take the ARPA money out, designate it for another purpose, promise people this was going to get done with bonding, and really we just to make people comfortable, we waited just to prove that there is no way this is going to get done by you. And we really are at risk of losing $2.5 million of ARPA funding. So that's what this is all about.
This secures the ARPA funding for the town, doesn't put $2.5 million in jeopardy.
Right.
But also reaffirms the commitment of the town to the Rooster River project and all the residents affected by that.
Right.
And the project has been slow, which is frustrating for residents, but it's been slow, to your point, as a result of things that are outside of the town's control. Army Corps of Engineers.
Corps of Engineering was supposed to have their review done within 12 months, turned into 18 or 14, 15, 16 months.
Right.
And it's because they don't have the staff.
But bottom line though, regardless of the slow walk of the project through the Army Corps of Engineers, the town is committed to this project. And this is evidence of that.
One of our engineers tracked down her contact at the Army Corps of Engineers on a beach and basically told her, you got to get your comments. I mean, it was very hard, even just to get them on the phone. They're looking at 30 projects a day. They were saying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Matola.
So John, you said Deep has to also look at all this, or they,
No, he passed it.
oh, we're all set with Deep then.
That would be-
It's the Army Corps.
That's in your packet.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and just one other thing to clarify, that the reason I made the comment about the estimate is that this 2.5 million, I think we approved the 2.5 million under the ARPA schedule 3 years ago or something. So no one should be surprised if these numbers change, you know, no one should be surprised if an estimate that was originally made years ago on a conceptual basis, you know, we're reaffirming our commitment for that money, but it may very well change. So I would expect that it does at some point down the road. All right, any other questions? No? All right. So let me, any questions on the bond resolution itself?
Michael.
No, I don't think so either. Okay.
I might,
All right, so we can take this to a vote. All in favor of approving the resolution and authorizing the grant and MOU for cost sharing set forth in item 3 of the agenda? Just raise your hand.
Aye,
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
So
it's me.
we have
Coming in loud and clear.
Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Penley, Mr. Matola, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark. Okay, so that motion passes 6-0. All right, thank you. So we can move on to item 4 of the agenda to hear, consider, and act upon a reallocation of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds per Exhibit A attached in the backup. Again, I assume this passed at the Board of Selectmen meeting. Okay, so that. And this again requires RTM approval. I have a motion to hear this item. Mr. Curley, second. Second. Mr. Kennedy. Okay, thank you. All right, so the backup for this item is printed on page 52 of the meeting materials. And so I will turn this back to either Mr. Becker or Mr. Gerber.
Yes, so We can walk through the items. There's about, I think we counted a few total changes, some items up, some items down, and two of them being new items. And then you'll notice in the end, we took the balance and we moved it into an unallocated line, which is where it at one point had resided as well for the other positions. So we're looking at ARPA Exhibit A, dated 5/31/24, and it's a 3-page document. And each project, the left-hand side, is numbered under. So first is row 2, COVID recovery assistance, $21,759 decrease. This, we had already taken it down some, we had left some money in for some final claims, and we are closing the program out at this point, as previously discussed, so that zeroes that out to the program as we work towards the end of ARPA. Item number 5, still on page 1, it's going to be the body cam, dash cam, and tasers. There was a negative amount of $5,320. We had talked for that small overage on the original 3.7 million. They were going to take it out of PD just from a cleanup perspective. It's actually easier to just take the 5,000 down off of this schedule anyways. So we've marked it off of here. The next is going to be again on page 1, item 7, Rooster River Detention Area. You'll see 2.5 million left of that original 3.5 project. So we are taking that down by the 2.5 million as discussed. I would note, and you total up the expenditures and you total up the encumbered amount and you look at the original project amount, that still does net out to 750,000, not the Bridgeport piece, but 750,000 of ARPA funds still going towards, ultimately spend on the river. And that's design, planning, work that's ongoing and has already occurred. So there has been quite a lot there to make that happen. Moving to page 2 on the schedule, the very first line is going to be 16 electric car charging stations. You'll see that there's a balance of $21,120. You'll see that we're proposing to increase that by $50,000. That has ties to a few different items, and one of the items is later on the next item we'll get to about electric vehicles. But there's a few moving pieces here. So the 21,000 that's already there, the 50,000 that we're looking to increase it by, along with a roughly $50,000 grant, will be the final payments that we've been holding off on the vehicle charging stations behind town hall, because there were some mechanical pieces that needed to come to place before we wanted to make the final payment. Also, they're part of the grant, covers all, but not some, but not all, adding a vehicle charger down at DPW. There's a question that came up with Board of Selectmen. Do they have electric vehicles there right now? The answer is no. And as part of our program, we have lots of chargers throughout that aren't necessarily where we have town vehicles, but we may at some point, because people may show up with electric vehicles. So that's part of that grant. So some of those funds will provide 1 2-port charger there, and then also be applied towards, along with the 50,000, adding two 2-ports, so a total of 4 charging behind the firehouse, station 1, and it'll be positioned next to the park. So it'll be close proximity to both the police station and the firehouse. That ties to the next item, which is item 30, which is the very last line on page 2, $306,000. So the $306,000 is primarily for purchasing 4 vehicles, 3 fully electric vehicles for the police department, 1 fully electric vehicle for the fire department. There is a small amount that's needed to cover the 12-month lease payment towards the Nissan Leafs. So that item, we had previously actually taken that down by 278,000, so it brings it back and to $2024. If we had just new administration, listening to pieces of information, not fully connecting nobody in town hall, understanding actually that there had been a concept of police and fire working towards some hybrids. They do have some hybrids, but also towards electric vehicles. So this brings that back as a pilot program. And they'll be, with this funds, they'll be buying 4 Chevy Blazer fully electric, patrol rated vehicles for them. So that is on item 30. The next 3 items are on page 3. And we're starting towards the bottom. Item number 39, Police Safe Corridor Program. So that is utilizing the remaining 17,489. And then you'll see on the right column, $92,000 increase. That has been a successful program for the police department. They would like to integrate that into more locations and add some technology to that to improve it. Again, it's a good program. It's worked well for them. It's mostly in the areas of schools. Also trying to springboard off of something that they got money for that was successful and increasing that. The next item is going to be 41 Sturgis project. Tim will be able to speak further on that along with Bill and I as needed. But that is towards, it's one part of many pieces, but it kind of one of the initial steps towards acquiring structure and land right next to a piece of open space that meets the parking at a minimum due to vehicles consistently being buses in the roadway. But that's tied to the Bill River project. So he can speak more on that. And then item number 42 is the Lake Mohegan Playground replacement. So this is marked at 75,000. So there's a few moving pieces with this. We have done through ARPA numerous playground replacements that were accelerated and done through ARPA. Playground replacements are usually around that 150 or so, depending on the playground number. This project is within the next few years, each year taking down several additional replacement projects in the capital schedule. Representative Sarah Kitt in the 134th put forward towards the end of the session a potential of doing that playground project. Got back 75,000 of the 150. So this matches that and then moves it to this fall and winter being able to do replacements. So it opens up as a newly replaced project later in the spring, and it takes it off the capital water fall as well. So this is sort of 50% and 50% because that's how much we got. So you'll see that when all that is done, it does leave a balance of $1,643,439 unallocated. We chose not to simply move that into the paving and sidewalk line, but to leave it as unallocated, knowing that get all the way out to December, this and any other minor cleanups, that is a place we can go. But as we have learned repeatedly with ARPA, a great funding source to do a lot of good throughout town. And there are numbers that change in any direction. It's a moving target. So we discussed, instead of just simply placing it there and then saying, but don't spend anything out of it until we actually know what we're finally doing if other things come up. Under the unallocated line, again, best available sort of information to us at the time. If we knew that, we probably wouldn't have suggested that other account in the first place the last time. So that's where we are at. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that summary. So we can take questions from the board. Mr. Mottola?
So basically the 1.6 million, you just want some flexibility. And you're pretty confident. You're confident that that money's going to be allocated by the end of the year, obviously. But something could come up and we may have to use that money for unexpected expenses or costs. Let's say a boiler blows up at a school or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Same. Some of these projects, when we go to settle the dust on them, we project spending all of this, but you may have a project that has a small amount and it's not going to be encumbered, or vice versa, it needs a small amount. And same that example. Our final, as long as we do it before 12/31 through the three boards, our plan to ensure at the very end is we can move it to pavement and sidewalk, and we can encumber it against us, a state bid PO. It's a very easy final place for us. But we have time to do that. So we wanted to move it to unallocated to be more genuine about the fact that it is truly, at this point, still technically allocated.
And then the only thing that's really, if I'm getting this understanding, is the Sturgis project, right?
The only,
Completely,
yeah,
completely new.
completely new would be Sturgis. Yeah, completely.
So, and it's been 3 years since we really looked at ARPA. Are we, we're confident that maybe we need to hear some details about the Sturgis project. This project, as we hear the details, you're confident that it's appropriate to use ARPA funds?
We are, and even as part of, some of the Rooster River that's already
Yeah.
occurred, there's been some land acquisition pieces in it.
Okay.
As long as it fits within our policies overall, it actually, our approvals and, our overall guidance, it part of, do fit within ARPA. This does based on that. And our thought process is that the ARPA funds would actually be the first out the door. So
Sure.
in the concept, of this 350, there's two other funding sources, but those two other funding sources can be some of the final updating and, outfitting and things like that can go out of there. The idea would be to release the ARPA right away when we actually go and transfer to make the purchase
Can we,
because of the time.
since we're at that, can we get a presentation on what the Sturgis project actually?
Yeah, that's a good idea, but can I just,
Tim's here, right?
Yeah.
before we move to Sturgis,
Yeah.
just a quick follow-up on this unallocated piece. It might be worth thinking about as we get to the end of the year. When we got this ARPA money, there was some question initially about what our charter required or what we needed to do in terms of approving these monies. And ultimately, I don't think it was crystal clear, but the former administration, I think Mr. Baldwin weighed in on it, Attorney Baldwin, and decided that all three boards should vote on the list as a whole, vote on any changes. And regardless of whether that was required, everyone felt like that was clearly the right thing to do. I guess my concern is as you get down to the wire, I'm not sure if I would ask the town attorney if there's some flexibility, because if there's some small pieces there, and I'm talking, if there's $10,000 or $20,000, or if there's some cleanup. Pardon me?
What I would just say is, we have bond counsel remaining on the line. I had asked him to stay for the
Okay,
ARPA.
yeah.
Finance has actually turned primarily to bond counsel on this because of the similarities in the approval. So I would just note if there's anything we're gonna.
And I don't know if, I don't know if that question ultimately became a charter interpretation or town policy or whatever. Because it wasn't an ARPA driven thing that drove us to do that. And again, I think as we make changes, and certainly these changes we're making tonight, I think it's appropriate all the boards look at them. But again, when you get down to the wire, if there's final cleanup items, say in the month of December, it's going to be impractical perhaps to go through all boards if you're moving a few $1,000s around. And I would hate to see us lose any money or have to give back any money because we can't get the mechanics done. So all I would suggest is I'm not looking for an answer now, but maybe see what might be appropriate and maybe come back to us and just let us know so that the expectations are clear. And we do what we have to do, but I think it's probably everybody's objective that we don't end up writing a check back on any of this money. So.
Could not agree more.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Matola.
I would just advise you that you should endeavor to come back to the town bodies because that's been the process all along. And I guess, if you get a legal opinion saying you don't have to, I guess that's okay. But for me, the process, and I think it's been an open process has been, we're going to get approval from the Board of Selectmen, Finance of the RTM. with respect to how to spend these ARPA funds. So for me personally, I don't want you to get stuck either, but I still think you should.
And just, if I could, John, just to clarify, I don't disagree, but so for example, tonight we're allocating $50,000 rounded to electric car charging stations, you know?
I get it, yeah.
We're still, so if we ultimately end up and it's
5,000
mid-December
bucks.
and it ends up being, 42,000,
I get
that's what I'm talking about. I'm not
Exactly.
talking about
Big.
just minor cleanup, just, do we need, and is there a mechanism? I'm just saying, maybe look at it.
So I would note just on that, of course, I'll eat my words if we come in at 42 for some reason. We actually put a lower number in on that one.
Okay.
Said that some of the work will be done as soft costs internally to drive that number a little bit. But you're right, even if it's 48,000 by the time we're done, because everything was optimistic, it is an issue and we don't want to be sitting here in December.
No, I think everybody wants to, if we have extra money and we can sweep it into paving, we'd rather sweep it into paving than give it back. So that's
Absolutely.
right.
We'll review again, and bond council's listening, and we'll review again with them because they have been the primary. I think we can meet that objective. One of the things that I've been working with all the departments that have items related to all of this has been to march towards at a minimum, encumbrances and items like that. But there are some big items still sitting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walsh, you had a question.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Matola's statement. I think it should go to all bodies, no matter what happens, no matter what the amount. If we have to have special meetings to make it happen, have the special meetings. This process was set up from the beginning. It's been consistent all along and should stay consistent, no matter what the amount.
Okay, thank you. Other questions before we move to Sturgis?
One quick one.
Mr. Curley?
With respect to the ARPA list, that it's been a bit of a moving target, right? Since the initial list was proposed, voted on by all three bodies, there've been changes multiple times along the way. I just want to make sure I'm clear on process. I respect the points that Mr. Matola and Mr. Walsh made in terms of making sure that final approvals are received prior to year end, even if it requires a special meeting. But I also appreciate the comment that our chair made regarding not losing money because of bureaucracy and something like that at the end. So the legal requirements are an important thing to understand. But is it safe to say that once we get to 12/31/2024, this list is locked and loaded? If we end up, we can't make adjustments at that point, right?
Well, it has to be, all the monies have to be encumbered.
Right. That's my point. So if we have a project on here out of the 42 different projects, if there are any funds that are not encumbered, they're gone. If there's a project that is the encumbrance exceeds the amounts here that the town's gonna have to top up, I guess the last step would be to pull from those other line items so that we get to zero.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay. No, thank you. Again, I mean, we all have our opinions, but I think we should find out what the requirement is and go from there. Okay. Sturgis.
Can I just make one quick?
Yes, please.
So at some point, if we don't want to be scrambling in December, maybe in November, whatever we have, we move it to paving because we know that we can encumber it in paving, and maybe that's, we'll just leave enough time.
Thinking about it, and part of what, I mean, it's easy for us to call a special meeting and meet immediately. The RTM has its own requirements since it's a little trickier. So as long as we're thinking about it, because we've been talking about this list for a couple of years and we didn't want to get ourselves in the situation we're in now. And we thought a lot of the other projects were on track and we're still moving things around. So just making sure we have enough maneuvering room. Yeah, I will. I just let David answer.
Yeah, just say some of these items, as we get closer, we're gonna start to encumber more, which will
Yeah.
start to cost get us
I
close.
mean, I don't view this as a big deal. I don't think it's gonna be a lot. I'm just throwing it out there.
It's been steadily, we've been trying to make movement on it. I think that it's the schedule. It is definitely moving in the right direction. And I do agree, we don't want to wait till the last minute. So there's a point where we can say.
All right, Mr. Walsh?
Maybe we should all three boards schedule a last meeting on this so that we're prepared to have a last meeting and just put it on our agendas.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea, because we set our calendar in December typically, so we could put a meeting that, you know, may or may not be necessary for like December 29th or so. I mean, just again,
No, but to Mr. Walsh's point, I mean, you could put it
We could
on,
on one
you
night.
could on one night with all the advance notice. And you say the last week before, there's a placeholder, if at the last minute you have to do it. And just like today, we've already been two boards. You could do, you
right,
could.
but special meetings are a little, so as long as we're thinking about it, like, I don't want to make too big of a deal about it, but I just, you know.
Maybe we ask everybody at least to put
I have to
something
spend
on.
New Year's Eve with you guys.
The New Year's Eve.
John, what would you rather be doing on New Year's Eve? Come on. All right. Yeah, we'll have a performance by the girls.
Crew will be here, that's right.
Okay. All right. Can we move to the Sturgis project?
Yes, so we have given a high level overview of this project at the board, and may have been before, you know, sort of the appraisal was done. I can't remember the exact timing. The appraisal was done, an offer was made, and I think rejected as too low and came back like at the appraised value. I think we went under the appraised value. Tim Bishop can catch you up on this, but I'm gonna let Tim describe the allure of this project and why so many people are excited about it. But there's a gentleman who is moving. He's got two adjacent properties right on Perry's Mill Pond, right where Mill River Lab is done, where, you know, right where the Boy Scouts have built the trails for people to use, and handicapped accessible trails, and where the students go and have their programming. One thing that has been a problem for the Mill River Commission, Wetlands Commission, is they store their equipment in Bridgeport. They bring it back to Perry's Mill Pond for programming. They bring it back to Bridgeport after the classes. There's a huge problem with it's very dangerous for the parents, volunteers, and the students to pull up. The kids get out, and they've got to evade traffic. So this is one property is would be a parking lot. There's nothing on it. The other one has a house on it that is from what we can tell is in pretty good shape. I'm going to let Tim take it over and explain why he was so keen to bring this up to us.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. Welcome, Mr. Bishop.
Tim,
Thank
are
you,
you there?
Bill. Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank you for having me tonight. As Bill had pretty much summed up a lot of the background, just to add some more detail. The project location is at 816 and 798 Sturgis Road. Right at, if you're familiar with that area, it's at kind of the intersection or triangle in the road where Sturgis meets Bronson, adjacent to the multiple nurseries on that section of road. Both parcels are immediately adjacent to our Perry's Mill open space, which totals just about 65 acres. Both parcels combined are roughly 3/4 of an acre. There's a single family home, roughly 1,600 square feet. I have been inside. It's got a very nice cabin feel with field stone fireplaces and wide plank pine floors. This came about with conversations I had at the end of last year with the current property owner, and like Selectman Gerber said, really started off with trying to solve the problem of the parking. Our open space parking currently holds about 3 or 4 personal cars. So you can imagine with the teaching staff and the Northern Wetland Committee and others that use our open space, full-size school buses on the side of Sturgis Road, plus 5 or more staff vehicles on the shoulder presents a dangerous situation for school kids. That's how this started with as far as my discussions with the owner to check the pulse on the availability of purchasing that vacant lot for parking. Immediately adjacent, we would be able to cut a trail right into our adjacent open space and solve that problem. Not surprisingly, Mr. Velez was reluctant to sell just the parcel. His intent is to move out of town, so he would economically and I think makes the most sense to sell both together, which we could all assume would turn into a tear down and a large home on 2 parcels up against open space. Presents a pretty nice place to live. That turned the discussion into he wants to sell both. Does the town and at the time me have an appetite for owning another structure and all that goes with that? That then turned into having both parcels. What can we use another structure for? And as things evolved, the discussions turned into how we create this home into an environmental science and education center that would benefit the school kids of this town. So it's, I think, it's just a strategic location, a rare opportunity that probably only is once in a lifetime, I think, to have all the pieces fall this way. But my vision was to create an environmental science center and operate it similarly through my department, similar to how Parks and Rec operates Penfield Pavilion. And that would involve scheduling and coordination of the facility for the use of environmental science, education with the Board of Ed, with Boy and Girl Scouts, with Mill River Wetland Committee, and so on. So that's kind of where we're at as far as the end goal. You do have a signed offer for $950,000, and we're working on the Attorney Piers is working on the contract with Mr. Velez's attorney. We're looking at different funding sources, as Mr. Becker and Gerber alluded to. And that's the intent. On the environmental education side, the kids are kind of already doing that, but laboriously and dangerously would solve those issues with this facility. And kids could collect aquatic insects and organisms and algae and right in the river and the pond on site. And, something I would envision fish tanks and microscopes in the facility where they would bring directly into the building, examine, those types of things. Obviously in coordination with the Board of Ed and the curriculum. But I think it's a great opportunity for the town. I think it'd be an amazing facility as far as environmental education for having hands-on lab, so to speak, for the students and the kids in this town. That's kind of my vision in a nutshell, and this is where we're at. So happy to entertain any questions that I could answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bishop. But before we go to the board, was someone, and I don't know who, going to discuss the other funding sources and how this works together?
Yes, so the 3 sources that we're looking to utilize would be all at the 350,000 level. And that would be ARPA 1 for the H. Smith Conservation Fund for 350, and then also the in lieu of fund for 350, which is actually something that's collected from TPC on certain projects. So conservation has, I don't know, so they haven't actually approved the funds to come out yet. They've approved the project as the concept, so they'd still need to go and do that. So there's numerous other approvals, and that's why I sort of said this is a step. It's doing it while we're doing the ARPA schedule. Tim is coming with sort of a preliminary, discussion about it. But we do intend as we come, this board's gonna see it again. All the boards are gonna see different pieces of it. And in that, we plan to have more information and be able to present a more formal presentation with some of the costing and whatnot. But they're at an earlier stage and trying to at least load this into ARPA while we're here, so we don't have to do that part. Because this part requires all three boards. Some of the pieces require, only two of the boards, but not the third board. Some of them require, certain pieces of this are one board doing agreement only. So there's some different pieces. There's a lot of different sets of. This one required all boards and it required ARPA, and we're doing ARPA. So we said, even though a little bit preliminary on it, at least put this into here and get that part done, since it required all three and in this order, and then we'd come back.
And it's the Conservation Commission who has to approve.
For H. Smith, the Conservation, and the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Finance, but not the RTM for that.
Well, H. Smith will be this board
H. Smith will be this board too.
as well.
Okay. All right. And then the third piece is
The in lieu of account.
is that when a developer pays a fee instead of putting affordable housing in?
Correct. That fund has the adequate funds to do that as well.
What is that money normally used for at the end?
I have been trying to, and I will get that answer when we come through the rest of the boards. I've been trying to sort of piece together, because it's been accumulating, but it's not frequently utilized. So I've been trying to work through even also confirming who has to approve funds, and possibly some indication of when it's been used in the past. So it's our understanding that it's accumulating more recently, but I can't even think myself, like many people, I think of an instance. There's got to be one, but we'll bring some more information.
If I'm correct, Tim,
So if for some reason the other pieces don't come together, then this will be, then this will have to be revisited, but somebody's got to go first. If it requires multiple approvals, one piece has to come first, and we're here and we're doing, okay.
This is all three, so that's why we came to this. I mean, normally we wouldn't say acquire and all these other things without more of the numbers, more of the information. We know we're gonna be coming back for that, but we want to at least set this piece in motion because we were here tonight doing our. And we have summer coming, so we're trying to then be respectful of times on specials.
You have a signed offer. Is there an expectation supposed to be
Speak up.
consummated with done with?
Timeline wise, I would say this, I would anticipate most likely a special meeting related to this over the summer.
Okay.
I don't think the person's gonna hold off all the way out until,
September.
right, and we're probably not gonna be able to enter into the exact, not just the purchase, but the true contract, unless we are sure we have the funds. That would be an issue. So I would anticipate a special, but just timing wise, not at that stage yet.
All right, thank you. Mr. Curley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Bishop, thank you for the summary. It's very helpful and generally supportive. I think it's a great idea. And it makes a lot of sense, but I just want to make sure I understood the numbers piece of it. If I heard you correctly, Mr. Becker, it was 3 different sources at $350 a pop. So the purchase price is a little over $1 million.
Correct.
And
But I just note, purchase, and then there's an expense piece on fitting. Some of that will be able to be done in-house through existing lines, but we've allocated, so purchase price, set that number was based on the $150 price and then about $100,000 for the outfit.
That was my question.
Knowing that it might go actually probably a hair over that, but that some of this work's gonna be internal, so it doesn't have a direct charge back to a budget line.
And to the extent that this is all, what's designated to the ARPA piece is 1/3 of that, that will be used regardless of where those numbers fall out, so we don't have to worry about that.
We envisioned using we envisioned using ARPA first.
Yeah.
Leave one of the other accounts that if it was, in the end, slightly less, then you leave money in the account. So ARPA would go out the door towards the actual purchase.
Yeah.
Whereas the other, one of the others might be towards the other, the outfitting piece. Sure, ARPA was spent.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other questions? Any other questions on this? No? Okay, all right. So are there questions on the other? So that was one, we had 8 adjustments to the ARPA schedule. Questions on any of the other adjustments that are being made? We had the police, we had the vehicles, we had,
Jim has his.
Mr. Walsh, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yeah, are we gonna talk about the police cars?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Whichever one anybody has a question on, we'll take that next. Do you have a question on that one?
Yeah, why don't we have a full blowout on this whole procedure, what's gonna happen here
Okay.
by the chief? Yep.
All
Full
right,
full
is-
discussion.
Yep.
Thanks.
Great. Is the chief on? I don't see him.
He is.
I'm on.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Good evening, everyone. Chief Bob Calamaris, Fairfield Police Department for the record. So when they began the electric vehicle project and allocated ARPA funding for it under the previous administration, they allocated a small portion, I'll say unofficially on the side, for both fire and police to begin a pilot program for full electric vehicles for both our agencies. In that process, they had completed, and I think Mr. Bremer, who was in charge of that project, was waiting for the finalization of the town project before he allocated any money to both police and fire. So when there was a little bit of money left from that, I guess that money got reallocated, and I requested Mr. Becker and Mr. Gerber to revisit the pilot program for both police and fire. In doing so, we got some estimates and put together a proposal for those vehicles. That said, in some sidebar conversations, this is a pilot program. We have some police departments, one being Westport, that has been using electric vehicle for quite some time. I think one of the key factors that we recognize with Westport's program was that they opted to go with a Tesla. A lot of the police equipment does not work readily with the Tesla. In fact, they had to kind of makeshift it in order to make it work. They don't have an MDT in that vehicle. These Chevy Blazer vehicles are very similar to a Ford Explorer, which the officers are using now as frontline cars, and also come equipped with the proper lighting and sirens and radio equipment that we would normally have in a police car. Of note, Mr. Becker discussed a 4-port charger, which will be implemented at the backyard of the fire station, right next to Sergeant Murphy Park. As he said, also we will probably get some of those costs completed by DPW or other means throughout town, and pay for the purchase price of the equipment with the money for the charging ports. With that said, I'll reiterate again that this is a pilot program. We purchased 4 hybrid vehicles in the current fiscal year. They are a little more expensive. I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze, for lack of a better term, on a hybrid vehicle. You're paying a little bit more, you're saving a little bit in gas, but you're not getting the maintenance savings that you normally would in an electric vehicle, and fuel savings that you normally would in an electric vehicle. I'm optimistic. I own a privately, I own a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and we personally love it. I don't know how it's going to apply to police work, but I'm very interested in seeing. I'm very interested in putting together some metrics to measure the cost savings and the benefits to these vehicles.
Great,
With that, if
thank
there's
you.
any questions.
Thank you for that summary. Questions from the board? Mr. Curley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief. That was appreciated. Quick question regarding, I appreciate the comments regarding how the Tesla vehicles don't make sense if it requires a lot of retrofitting, and that these Chevy vehicles are, no pun intended, closer to plug and play. But
Yes.
knowing that the Ford also has a fleet of Fords, is there a reason why you went with Chevy over Ford? I imagine Ford has a similar vehicle, all electric available, but I'm just curious about the selection on Chevy.
Yes, that's a great question, and I probably should have touched on that. So, I've spoken to some chiefs that have implemented electric vehicles. There were some advocates for the Mustang Mach-E, which is a little bit smaller of a vehicle, while the performance and everything else that kind of goes with it is admirable. All the chiefs that went with the Mach-E suggested go with the F-150. And in researching the F-150, we found that there were some issues with the electrical system, and then also they're very, very difficult to get. So we looked at the Chevy Blazers, which came custom fitted with the police package on it from the factory. So as I said, we test drove it, we looked at them, we did some research on it, and in comparison to the Ford Explorer, which is the frontline officers are driving right now, that is probably the closest vehicle that we have to what we're currently using.
And when would you be able to acquire these?
So we have been working with Maritime Chevy, which is right in downtown Fairfield.
Great.
And they have them on their lot.
Wow.
And we looked at them, the ones that they have on their lot, and they have the availability to get more if necessary.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Walsh.
Good evening, Chief. First, I'd like to thank you for taking my call today and answer a couple questions, but it led to me to think of a couple other things. You mentioned that these are going to, two will be used for is it the traffic enforcement, or was it ticket enforcement? I can't remember.
It was a traffic enforcement unit.
Okay, so those would need the full package, correct? Lights and everything.
Lights, and more importantly, light, siren, MDT, radio package, and all the equipment that would come like a frontline patrol car.
Okay, and then the other thing you mentioned is that two of them would be used for detectives.
One of them.
One of them? And what would the fourth one be used for?
The fourth one is for the fire department.
Oh, okay. So somebody on fire, will discuss that one when we get to that, when you're done. So my question, I guess, is why isn't one of them, if we're really thinking about going to electric vehicles, which I'll tell you, a lot of the world is going the opposite direction on this, a lot of the world, because of the environmental issues with creating the batteries and it taking like a full square acre to make one battery in like parts of Russia and China. But let's just avoid that for a second. If we're really thinking about going there, and this is some trial program, why wouldn't one of these vehicles be on the front line with your patrol officers to give it a full test to see whether it could handle it, as opposed to finding the problems with that later on?
Good question. So the traffic unit is as close as you can get to the frontline patrol officers. And as I stated to you earlier, when an officer gets into a patrol car, if he's using a different or driving a different patrol every day, every single one of our frontline cars are outfitted exactly the same. So when it's dark and they need to know where the radio is in high stress situations, they need to know where the lights and sirens are. They need to know where the door handle is to get out of the car if they need to. All those things need to be in the same place at all times. I also shared with you when we went from Crown Victorias to Ford Explorers. We did the same thing in 2011. I ran the fleet at the time, and we didn't know which way to go. We didn't know whether we should use sedans because they were making sedans, or if we should go with utilities. And in that same circumstances, we ended up buying 2 sedans and 2 utilities, putting them in traffic, and let the traffic officers, who are as close as a patrol officer, trial those vehicles.
Okay. But to your knowledge, there hasn't been one police department in the state of Connecticut, nor the state police, that have put one of these electric vehicles at the front line with a patrol officer, correct?
So to my knowledge, I know of one department that bought 2 Mach-E's for traffic safety units similar to ours. And then Westport uses a Tesla, and that is not a frontline vehicle.
Okay, so there's not, like, I'm thinking about most of the vehicles that you buy on a yearly basis that go to your patrol officers. That, you know, other than traffic, people who are just handling traffic, there's not one vehicle, electric vehicle, in service in the state of Connecticut, either state or local, that's for a frontline patrol officer that's currently in use, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I do not know of it.
Okay. I mean, it surprised me when I asked you about whether the state police were using this, because, you know, the state's been kind of at the front line of, you know, the governor wants, you know, all these electric cars by 2036 and thinks we could put all this infrastructure in to get that done by then. And that seems to be a little, you know, coming up quickly with all that needs to be done. And yet, not one state police vehicle has been put on a patrol officer in the entire state of Connecticut. It's just things that make me like, I'm like wondering why that is. And I hear you made some great points today when we spoke about, you know, and I understand like the stress of a police officer, but couldn't like one group of police officers use that one car every day so that they get used to it and then give an opinion about it at the end of the 2 years or whatever it is?
Sure. I mean, I have the option to assign that to patrol. I would be cautious to do that, just knowing the type of work that they do and knowing that the traffic enforcement unit does a very similar job. You know, constantly pulling over cars, constantly going through those same motions over and over, being en route to calls. It's the same type of activity that a patrol officer would do, and I think we can get the same experience from that from a traffic officer. Just my opinion.
Okay, and what's the additional stress of a patrol officer versus someone doing traffic?
Well, you know, it's pretty much known by everybody that traffic enforcement or traffic stops and domestic violence are the 2 most dangerous things a police officer can do.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't think there's any stress difference. I think when our traffic officers could potentially respond to any call in the town of Fairfield. They're designated to go out and do traffic enforcement on our roadways, but they can be assigned to anything we assign them to.
Okay. All right. I have no more questions. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions for the chief on the police cars? Okay. Any other questions on the electric vehicle or electric charging station adjustments on here?
I have a question about the charging.
Sure. Let Mr. Penley go and then I'll circle back to you, Mr. Walsh.
I just have a point of, thank you, Chief, for all that. That was helpful. My question is just clarify. Here it's saying you're purchasing EV vehicles. I think you mentioned that they're hybrids. Did you say?
He has such donut.
Okay, all right. And the purpose of the whole pilot, what you're piloting is whether it's going to reduce costs owning a fleet of electric vehicles versus regular combustion engine. That's the purpose. That's what you're piloting.
Yeah, I think that the purpose is bifurcated. If you know, at some point we are either going to have to invest in this or we're going to have to dismiss it. And I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know what the future holds. So what I'd like to do is at least get our feet wet, purchase a couple of these vehicles, trial them. You know, the electric vehicles might be perfectly fine, the size of them and everything that goes with them, in which case we might move in that direction. But it would be irresponsible for me to go and buy 10 electric vehicles this year and put them on the front line in hopes that they work.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm just asking a more basic question, or maybe just a dumb question, but you're not testing whether something about the vehicle can't do the job of another car, right? I mean, are you testing that, like the efficacy of using an electric vehicle, a practical way it drives, and or it's just sort of a maintenance fuel savings issue that we're looking at?
I think it's fuel savings, maintenance, you know, overall efficiency of our fleet, sustainability, if you want to call it that. Yeah, all of those things. I don't think there's going to be a problem with using the electric vehicles as a vehicle. I'm sure just like our patrol cars, we're going to run into issues with some of them, but you know, I think they've come a long way, and you know, as I said, I think we have to pilot it before we can kind of dive in.
Okay, got it. And then just to along the lines of what Mr. Walsh was asking you, piloting it on the cars that are assigned to traffic policing, that's going to put the car under similar stress as a patrol that's doing patrolling other types of crimes. Is that correct? It's going to be a similar type of stress to the car?
Yes, I would say equivalent.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Penley. Mr. Walsh?
Chief, have you talked, or you guys have done research regarding how often you're going to have to, based on your, you know, you guys use the vehicle 24 hours a day. So how often you're going to have to replace a battery that could be $10,000? Is it going to be, because you're going to own it. You're not going to lease it and turn it in and let somebody else pick up the tab on doing a battery. We're going to become an owner of this car, and I guess plan on keeping it around for a while and replacing the battery and things like that, correct?
That's correct. And you know, as I said, I don't think any department is there yet. I would say only within the last 2 or 3 years, departments have begun to implement electric vehicles, and they're kind of just dipping their toe in the pool, grabbing 1 or 2 cars and testing it out. So I have no knowledge of departments that have had to replace batteries or have had issues with batteries to their vehicles.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a standard on every electric vehicle. That's a standard maintenance operating maintenance car.
Have a lot of them.
Battery, because every single battery you start using it.
It lasts a long time.
Chevy for their EV is, I believe, estimates 8 years and 100,000 miles. So obviously there's a question,
Okay.
and that's part of the learn here. If additional strain or anything like that from a policing perspective, But that is their normal life expectancy, 8 by 100.
I think that's
Yeah,
the
but we're
warranty.
using
I
it
think the life
20.
is.
Yeah, and I think it might be actually more than that, but
So that's the warranty. Okay.
That-
We're gonna be using it
I think
20.
the
that's
life-
usually a baseline
I
number.
think the
you
life
obviously-
is longer too, but I mean, in my impression, I could be wrong, is that it's not dissimilar to sort of the life of a combustion and,
Exactly.
Yeah, typically 10 to 20 years.
10 to 20 years, okay. I guess it all depends on usage.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
but I guess I'm looking for some knowledge on regards to, Ms. Charlton, you're not using yours 265 days a year. Because there's three shifts. This car is technically going to be in the fleet, an active fleet, being used round the clock with.
Yeah, that's
even
why I
when it-
think we were associating it with miles and I don't think we have the answer. So I think
That's why this is a great.
yeah, it's, and listen, obviously this is a significant change. There's some unanswered questions. I mean, my reaction to this is that it's kind of nice that we have this ARPA money to be able to utilize it to do the pilot. To the chief's point, you'd hate to want to invest in 10 cars at one time. I think a couple, we have to invest in the charging stations too, but I think a couple cars to see how this goes. It may be a bust, it may be fine. And then, we go from there and, but that's what a pilot is. So, okay.
Chief, in regards to the charging stations, I would take it that's kind of like filling up your tank from the town's gasoline tank, right? So there's not going to be anybody from the town, from the public, an employee, anybody from the departments using this charging station for their own cars, correct?
Correct. We currently have a gas tank in the back of our police department and nobody uses it for their personal cars.
Okay, so we drive by, the only thing we should expect to see are one of these 4 cars, correct?
That's correct.
The same applies to that new row of town vehicles.
At town hall, yeah.
That's town vehicle. That's where those vehicles park. It's assigned to them. If they weren't there, they wouldn't be charged up necessarily for the next day.
Okay. And on Mr. Becker, since you brought that up, I guess there's a way for you to program only certain cars to use them, correct, at town hall?
That'd be a question that we can go with the IT department for, but
Didn't they say they had to put in a code or something?
I believe that there is a piece there. I will add that in my notes to confirm that, but
There's an awful lot of traffic there. If anyone else was charging there, they would.
And I vaguely remember something, and possibly it was through internal audit, about the mechanism. So people needed to punch in a code or use a card, or there was something like somebody from the public couldn't just drive up and plug in, as I recall. So,
I'll put that in my notes.
I mean, that's different. I know there's some charging stations around town that are open to the public, but that's different. Yeah. All right. Other questions on this item? These 2 items? Questions on other ARPA items? Any? I just have one quick one. So, by the way, I'm very happy to see the Lake Mohegan Playground to get 100% funded between ARPA and the state grant. That's awesome. That'll be terrific. Just a quick one. This COVID recovery assistance, I know this is being closed out. Was that the one? I thought there was there a review being done of this program? Trying to remember.
So, Board of Selectmen meeting today. We talked about that. Yes, there is a review of one item being done by outside counsel. First Selectwoman, former First Selectwoman Kupchik, current Selectwoman Kupchik asked about this fund today. I think she was wondering, since we're closing this fund out, have all of the approved applications been paid? so that it's okay to close this out. And what I said today was there is one application that was approved that will not be paid out. And that is because I deemed it inappropriate. And so it's currently being reviewed by outside counsel. So Ms. Kupchak asked for an executive session to discuss that further. And I said today at the Board of Selectmen meeting that I will talk to Phil Pierce, the town attorney, about possibly whether we can have an executive session to talk about that one item. But other than that, the rest of them have been paid out.
Okay, and the only reason I'm asking is I think it was Mr. Becker that told us at one point there was an investigation or something, but whatever's under investigation was not paid.
It's not paid.
We don't have risk that, I'm not, this is federal money, obviously, it's part of a larger grant, so we don't have anything that was paid out that is of concern that's being investigated.
I
that fair?
wouldn't go that far, but with a final specific item I wouldn't go so far as the investigation certainly is looking at the entire fund and it's there, but I don't want to speak for.
Okay, all right, if I don't want to speak out of turn, since it's being closed out, I just wanted to.
Go as far as nothing.
All right,
I did, well, you're gonna. I have one follow-up on another.
Yep.
Okay, so just on,
Go back there.
Yeah.
On this one, I have a question.
yeah, when you're off of that,
Yeah, on this, I get it, but I thought the COVID recovery assistance program was basically a program that would give, I think it was a $5,000 amount for those who qualify.
Up to.
Oh, up to, okay.
And it was, there were amounts approved by a committee that was established for this purpose, sort of administered under Human Social Service.
Yeah.
And
The amounts could have been less than 5.
they could have been less, a lot of them were 5, but a lot of them were less.
Got it.
And it was, the committee itself approved applications based on an anonymous description of a situation without names, so that
There were redacted applications.
Yeah.
That's fine. The reason I was asking was because I was under the impression that it was for $5,000 blocks, and I couldn't reconcile why.
it was a round number.
Yeah, well, no, why it's not a round number, right? It's.
I mean, why it's not a round number. And
That explains it.
really, a lot of times it was based on a specific need.
And that's fine.
Someone had to pay their
Spend
rent,
time on it.
yeah.
so we could have paid an invoice on someone's behalf for a specific dollar amount.
It was for a specific dollar.
Yeah, because to Mr. Curley's point, it's 21,759. It is sort of an odd.
and I would say in that it did originate off of an audit, it'll ultimately. That audit and likely. Investigation piece that went outside, back like through the audit committee. That's I envisioned, and then up to the board in our next round.
Okay, and I didn't mean to jump the gun. I thought that if
No,
this is over, I just
This
wanted,
board really wanted that to be
yeah, no, I never liked.
It is done, it is done now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So.
Mr. Walsh had a question or? Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, yes, I wanted to get explanation on the fire department vehicle, what type of vehicle it is, what it's being used for. Is it a fire truck? I mean, what is it?
Okay, and thank you for that question. Did you have something to say to wrap up the last?
No,
discussion?
it's on this as well. I just wanted to follow one item and I can answer that.
Okay.
It's actually on, both of them are on.
Yep.
So, or Mr. Walsh's and mine. James Bryan sent me a text, now, he's watching it, probably need to, so thank you. And he noted that, there's a key fob system is what it is, not a punch code, but you got the key for the vehicle, then you.
Fob for the
fob,
truck, right.
pull it there, and then it identifies it and then allows it to charge, so this would be the same overall system. So
Excellent.
it is secure for the charging of who goes in there, and these are obviously marked to not park in there in the first place as well, and they'll be. So, so that's the update on that end. And
Thank
then, yeah, you're welcome. And so this is, the vehicle would be the same, same make, the overall,
The fire vehicle.
the fire vehicle. Similar to how they use on admin and some of the fire inspector vehicles, similar to the police fleet. They're outfitted with emergency lights and some other packages. So it'd be the same, it'd be a very similar spec.
Is it also meant to be a pilot, I guess is the
And
question?
again, as a pilot to see. So the idea is that this would go to the fire inspectors. And they're a similar use. It's not a vehicle that is on the road 24 hours a day. And some of them need, there's a degree of 24-hour access, but again, a lighter sort of degree similar to traffic and other units. So it would be, it fits, and they use very similar specs now. One of our hopes in this actually was to also get one of some of the last Crown Vics that we have in the overall town fleet still reside within the fire department. And those are very inefficient to maintain. Gas guzzlers, really bad for the environment. So the idea would be that one of those would rotate out finally from the fire department's overall fleet, and that this would go to a fire inspector use. Again, similar to pilot it.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, does that answer your question?
It does. I just want to ask Mr. Becker a question. Is the reason why it needs to have the light package and all that stuff on it so that if there was like a fire that they inspect because they're fire marshals, right? They're not fire inspectors. Is that the position?
There's a fire marshal who is an assistant chief. There is a deputy fire marshal who is a lieutenant, and there are two firefighters who are fire inspectors currently in that office.
Okay.
All of them at times 24/7, 365 do respond. Usually you get, they start with the fire marshal. If he's not there, then you get the deputy, and then oftentimes they pull, at least one other person from that office, sometimes more. When they're on duty and there are fires, they will, during the day, they'll certainly respond even. You'll get sometimes all of them that will pile in. And it depends on the complexity, but oftentimes, what lights and sirens, whatnot as well. They also carry in their vehicles numerous pieces of equipment beyond just their normal firefighting out gear. So, and that's all the way down to the inspectors. So different levels depending on. So this was envisioned most likely to go to one of either the deputy or inspectors. As a Crown Vic. And then to find out how it works for them.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
And then on that same line item, it's not a big number, but part of that line is $35,000 to go to. Says we were advised that $35,000 is needed to cover the remaining 12-month lease costs for the 6 Nissan Leafs vehicles. So I guess I have two questions. One is, why was it short? I thought we had an expended money to pay for the entire lease. Tell me if I'm wrong, maybe I am. And then the other question was, I thought the Leafs were going away after 2 years, and we were supposed to get, regular, like a whole order of regular EV vehicles. So I didn't know the Leafs were staying. So is this an additional, these Leafs plus the other vehicles that you purchased? Is this more than what we anticipated when we first handled ARPA on this item?
They're not going to stay. They're not staying any longer than as originally anticipated. We were under the same impression when we came in that they had been paid all the way to the end, but actually that payment to get them to the end had not been made. That's why we're asking for this piece now to bring that to the end, and then our intention is at the end of that pre-planned to hand them back.
Okay, so did we buy 12 other electric vehicles, and then these 6 Leafs are going away at some point? So we really have 18 now?
We own the bolts.
Okay, how many volts do we have?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think you are right. It's around a dozen. I can get you the exact numbers. So.
Okay, so right now we really have then 18 EV vehicles. How did that? do we need that many, and how did that come to be?
You're talking about an item that entirely predates us. You know,
It's still a smaller fleet than we had before, though, as I recall. Jim, I'm with you. I thought we heard 15 at one point, but I thought that the fleet prior to the EV program was something like 23 or 25. Yeah, I don't know.
this reduced the amount, this kept some of the department specific or individual specific on the high users, and then had some flex vehicles. I believe it's a reduced number from, had gotten every department and there were so many vehicles. We do also believe that when it comes time to turn these in, that number does not need to be as high as it is now. There are some vehicles that have very low uses, and don't necessarily even have equipment or things that are, you know, having to come in and out of them. So we do plan to revisit it. I think it's premature for us to say the exact number we think we need, but I can definitely say a few of these when they go, certainly fine to.
And did we end up, and I'm sorry, we'll move on, but did we end up doing those leases because we were having trouble purchasing cars at that time? I remember it was a
My
long delay.
understanding, and it came up at the Board of Selectmen today, Ms. Kupchak brought up that there was quite a bit of a difficulty in that window, so that does seem to line up based on the feedback from there. Again, entirely to the point, I have no background directly predates us, but electric vehicles, all vehicles were very difficult.
Yeah, no, to Mr. Walsh's point, I don't know why I could swear we talked about 15 number. So if it's 18 and you're saying that we have some with low usage, that doesn't surprise me, but
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate. It's everyone's. Okay.
I can get you the exact of how many we have, and we definitely.
Yeah, that would be
We
helpful.
definitely intend, I mean, there are some that use 5 miles per month right now. So it's, you know, it's absurdly low. It's absurdly low usage. And here's what I would tell you when so I'm actually, because I have a copy of a very very early sort of accounting of them. I'm looking at a total of, I've got a total of 21 on the schedule, which would be 1, 2.
21 EVs?
I've got it as, I'm looking at the plate numbers. Yeah, I don't think that there's any overlap on here. If I've got it right, it'd be 21 EVs, of which 6 of them are Leafs. And, you know, to my, sort of my
So
point.
21 minus
We have-
those 6 would be the 15 I thought we heard
We've
about.
got some that are getting, you know, 5 miles a month, 9 miles a month, 21 miles a month, 14 miles a month. You know, most of them after that sort of go up. And then you've got others that are getting, you know, an average of 396. You know, the building department is the most active of them all, utilizing them. The health department second to that. And then there's, you know, 1 or 2 pool vehicles with a lot of use, but everything else is less. So when you look at numbers like that, you say, you know, definitely when the Leafs go, you know, are we sure when we look at the actual use and the way they are and how many are out at any given time, can we adjust, you know, do we need to replace them in some capacity? But right off the bat, just by those miles, you know, 3 or 4 of them are out, right? So, but this, you know, we need to make this payment. We have a lease. To Mr. Walsh's point, we thought that it was already paid. It turns out it wasn't. We'd like to take it out of ARPA because it wasn't a budgeted item. But this then kind of closes out,
Okay,
cruises to the end on the Leafs.
all right.
I would just like to say that 21 EVs is way more than we ever thought we were going to have. We're basically where we were before. And if we're driving some of these vehicles 21 miles a month, take a goddamn Uber. Why are we paying for these things?
Getting rid of them.
Getting rid of them.
I
We agree.
We're all on the same page.
I agree with you, Mr. Walsh.
I'm not sure how that happened either, Jim. My sense is that, I don't know if I swear I have 15 in my head. 6 least is 21 that we appear to have. And maybe it was just something where I feel like we were hearing for a year and a half that there was a backlog on the EVs. And maybe we order 15 and we lease 6 in the meantime, and that's where we end up. Whatever it is, but I'm glad to hear like that analysis that you're talking about, and looking at that usage is critical. Obviously, we shouldn't be committing to anything that we're going to drive 5 miles a month. So it's disappointing that happened. But hopefully as we move forward in this program, we get it cleaned up, because I agree with Jim. It's crazy.
Chief Calamars use a leaf?
I'm
I'm just kidding, Chief.
I was thinking the same thing. Well, 2 leaves together.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Okay, any other questions on these ARPA adjustments? Okay, all right. Seeing none, all in favor of approving the reallocation of ARPA funds per Exhibit A in the published meeting materials, please raise your hand. Mr. Penley, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark, Mr. Walsh, Ms. Ruggiero, are you there?
Yep, I.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes 7-0. All right, so we're going to move to item 5. Item 5, to hear an update from the purchasing director on the purchasing policy. So Adam Toolin is here just to remind the board and maybe the public, this body, in its last iteration, I think it might have been Mr. DeWitt's final meeting, we approved a purchasing policy. It was in November of last year. And we knew at the time that we approved it, that the document needed some cleanup and reorganization, and that as the policy was rolled out, management would likely come back to us with an update to determine if any modifications were appropriate, if anything wasn't working, or added. So it's been roughly 6 months since then. We asked Mr. Toolin to come tonight and give us an update, and he is here, so welcome. And I will turn it over to you. I think you're muted, Adam.
How about, I'm doing a call-in and a video. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Yep, thank you for having me. This is Adam Toolin, Purchasing Director. Happy to be here. I'm going to try a share screen. I put together just a quick PowerPoint. All right. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So just a quick timeline, as Ms. Charlton just mentioned. As a reminder, the new purchasing policy was approved back in November. We issued what I would call sort of a quote unquote soft launch in December. You might notice I have an asterisk there. That's because as Ms. Charlton mentioned, there were sort of basically the first 38 pages of the document were approved, pending formatting cleanup and a later review of the appendices, exhibits, which were a much greater number than 38 pages. So back in December, I did this soft launch where I put together a memo with sort of my key changes that I wanted, or the key highlights that I wanted all department heads to know about. And I'll show you that on the next slide. But basically at this point, we've spent the last several months internally, the purchasing department, and now recently with Attorney Peers, doing an internal review, really looking, okay, a lot of time and people and ideas went into putting this policy together. It's pretty extensive. Let's really look at, make sure everything lines up, make sure everything makes sense. So at this point, I now have a document with a number of, typographical corrections, but also some suggested improvements that I think after talking to Ms. Charlton last week, we'll probably want to have maybe a special meeting sometime this summer where I actually present these ideas to you for consideration in a final document, at which point we will then actually complete the document, and then we'll be planning hands-on, in-depth training sessions with all the departments for the fall, once that document is final. So just quickly, here's a look at the memo. I don't know if you can really see it, but just the key points that I wanted to share with the departments were the new bid thresholds. That's a big change. I highlighted the local MRO program, which had some significant changes. I wanted to take the opportunity to reemphasize how town surplus should be handled, which actually wasn't a change, but seemed like a good opportunity to bring that up. There are some fairly significant changes to exceptions to bidding. What a bid waiver, when a bid waiver can be used, what is exempt, things like that. So I wanted to highlight those. And then again, I took the opportunity to remind of the appropriate processes for doing basically paying for services, doing a purchase rec when appropriate versus using a pink voucher when appropriate. So and then also we created this new bid intake form as a part of this process, and I included this in the memo just so departments could really see what do we need to make the bid process efficient, and really, effectively get the information we need. Sorry, I'm stumbling there. I was trying to think how I wanted to pose this. Where this really comes helpful is when I need to bring a contract before the Board of Selectmen, for example. There's a whole bunch of little pieces of information I need to know, and we're finding it very difficult to gather all that, or not difficult, but inefficient. So this has been a really helpful document. It's actually still a work in progress, but this will be one of the proposed exhibits when we do get to a final vote over the summer. So just a couple other key changes I felt that the new policy put into effect that we have, that they're just worth mentioning. That there's now a requirement to include witnesses at all bid openings. I think that was probably already done. However, now this has changed the process in that we now have a bid form or a bid log sheet that is signed by multiple town employees, to make sure that nothing shady is going on, honestly. I haven't done this for you yet, but there's a requirement in the policy now that I report any bid exceptions to you guys on a quarterly basis. I have been tracking that, so whenever you guys think it's appropriate to have me come in and do that, I will be prepared. And then this has sort of come up in some other areas, but there's a new requirement or a suggestion anyway in the policy to add insurance tracking, certificates of insurance tracking into Munis, which I actually, sort of unrelated to this policy, have been talking with Ms. Saxel about this. So it's something we're investigating, and I think it could improve some of our contract management level concerns. It's not exactly related to this policy. Ms. Charlton asked me to just touch on a couple items that you might see a few weeks from now or whenever this meeting might be, without going into super detail. I mentioned the MRO program before. I think I even mentioned this at the time of the initial vote. I really put a lot of time into thinking about this MRO situation. I think the way it is right now, it's a sort of vague program that doesn't really have clear direction, and it also has some sort of conflicting. There's some aspects of it that conflict with other parts of the purchasing policy. So I've talked a little bit with Mark Barnhart about this because I think it's also a great economic development tool. I'm just wondering at this point if it might be more effective to have this just be a policy statement of some kind, rather than a whole program. You know, something where we're encouraging town departments to utilize local vendors, rather than trying to create some complex program. But I'm open to ideas. It's just sort of where my head is right now. Another item that came up during Attorney Pierce's legal review has to do with some FOIA concerns he had when it comes to some language that was in there about emergency procurements and how and when the Board of Finance, you know, gets their say in those things. So we'll have to look at that when we bring this up for a vote. Just a
Excuse
couple
me,
more
Adam,
quick.
do you mind if should we ask questions can we ask questions as you go along?
Sure, I'm just rambling. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's, so that emergency procurements versus FOIA, so that was actually a carryover from our previous policy, and if I recall that correctly, if there was an emergency purchase required, it needed concurrence from the Board of Finance, and as I understood that at the time, and this was from talking to then Attorney Baldwin, he explained that concurrence did not have to be in a meeting. It could be, you know, via email or in some other informal manner. And is that where and so when the first time that we had to do a vote for concurrence, I think was during a land purchase, and I decided to have a meeting so we could vote and it would be transparent. So is the concern here on the FOIA that concurrence would happen outside of a meeting under the policy?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, got it. All right. So that's something that Attorney Pierce will advise you on when you come back with the red line. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. Just a couple other things. There's a section 10 of the policy. It's a lot of our sort of normal terms and conditions. I just had a number of, after reviewing with my staff, sort of a number of suggested, I'll call them best practices improvements. Nothing is egregious in any of these, you know, I list pre-bid, addenda. Those are just sort of subheadings within section 10. I will point out award protest. There's a part in section 10 about protesting awards, which I actually love that. And I've instituted formal protest policies in my previous towns. I do think it can be a great tool. However, it doesn't appear anywhere else in the policy, and I never noticed that before. So, you know, that's something I'll want to talk to you guys about. Do we want to formalize a protest process, and what are the pros and cons of that? And then just quickly looking at the exhibits, you know, there were, I don't know if any of you have it in front of you or if you remember, there were a number of exhibits recommended. I think without actually really eliminating any of the information, I think we can greatly reduce or make more efficient the exhibits. There are a good 5 or 6 near the end that I think could easily be condensed into a single, maybe not even an exhibit, just a page in a bid package where we, you know, ask bidders to confirm that they're not colluding and that they're not delinquent in taxes and things like that. So, you know, it's all just pretty basic things, but there are a number of them. So I just wanted to sort of give you the highlights, and then again, we can plan on going in more depth, going through these items in more depth at a later date. That's all I have prepared.
Okay, thank you. And just for the board members, I just want to be sensitive when we get a red line of this document. I don't think it's going to be anything like the last version. I don't think there'll be very extensive changes, but I think we want to make sure everyone has adequate time to review it. So I will poll the board members by email and work with Adam, and we can figure out a time to put a special meeting on the calendar because we do not have a regular meeting scheduled until September. And obviously we want to make sure that this policy can get rolled out as quickly as possible. Are there any questions from the board? All right. Thank you very much, Adam, for being here. Appreciate everything that you're doing. We'll see you soon.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to item 6 to hear, consider, and act upon a recommendation from the Board of Finance Audit Subcommittee to accept the bid and reappointment of the independent auditors for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. I have a motion to hear this item. Mr. Penley, seconded by Mr. Stark. I am going to turn this over for discussion to Mr. Mottola, who is the chair of the Audit Subcommittee. Mr. Mottola?
Sure, thank you. So the board will remember 3 years ago now, right? 3 years ago, we entered into a contract with the KF O'Connor Davies to be our auditor, and we're on year 3 now. The full amount for year 3 that was agreed to is $132,600. And every time, this time of year, we vote to reappoint our independent auditors. This item number 6 is a little misleading because the audit subcommittee did not recently meet to accept the bid and reappointment of the independent auditor. Now, we did that work a couple of years ago, if you recall. So I'm going to make a friendly motion. Just change item number 6 to read the following matters. Here, consider and act upon the reappointment of the independent auditors for fiscal year ended June 30th. So I would make that motion to amend how number 6.
I'll second the motion. Any questions or discussions on that? All in favor of amending that wording of the agenda item?
Aye.
Okay, it is unanimous, 7-0 with Mr. Castani and Ms. LaClara. Okay, yeah, and we will vote on the amended one. Is there any comment or discussion on the appointment of the auditor? Okay. All right, so all in favor then of the amended motion to reappoint KF O'Connor Davies as the town's independent auditor for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. Please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, again, it is unanimous 7-0. All right, thank you, Mr. Mottola. All right, we'll move to item 7 to hear, consider, and appoint the clerk and assistant clerk for the Board of Finance for the next year ending May 2025. Motion to hear this item. Mr. Stark, seconded by Mr. Curley. Okay, just quickly, as the board knows, the town CFO has traditionally served as this board's clerk. And several months ago, when our CFO left the town's employment, our town controller, Caitlin Bossy, graciously agreed to temporarily take on the role in anticipation of a new CFO being hired. Unfortunately, the permanent CFO role is not filled yet. Mr. Becker continues to serve in that capacity while the recruitment process continues. And from my perspective, once we get a new CFO on board, I think it's likely that individual, or the board would want that individual to serve as clerk. But until then, and while Mr. Becker remains in the interim role, I believe it's most appropriate to designate him as our board's clerk. I just want to say it's been a real pleasure working with Mr. Becker these past months. He's done an outstanding job during this transitionary period. But more importantly, and in reality, as it relates to this board, he's really been the one that's been instrumental in helping me and us to organize agendas, to pull together information, to coordinate with department heads and get all the meetings we need for our get all the materials we need for a meeting, which is the function of the clerk. So with that said, I would like to go ahead and formally nominate Mr. Becker to serve as clerk for the upcoming fiscal year. Second, Mr. Curley. Okay, comment or discussion from board members? Yeah, I see none. Any other nominations? Okay, I see none. All right, so with that, all in favor of appointing Mr. Becker as the clerk of the Board of Finance, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Penley, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Ruggiero, Ms. Carlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark. Opposed? Abstain? Mr. Walsh? Okay, thank you, everybody. So that motion passes 6-0-1. All right, so now moving on to the assistant clerk.
No, that wasn't my vote. I put my hand up when I said no.
Oh, you said no, I apologize. Okay, so Prudy, you got that? So 6-1-0, all right? Moving on to the role of the assistant clerk, Jennifer Carpenter's been serving in that capacity and doing the work of helping communicate with the board our agendas and getting our meeting materials out, coordinating schedules with town officials and others who come before our board and keeping us on task. And she has been terrific in doing that work. And I would particularly commend her for helping keep everything together and the wheels on the train during the transition to a new administration. So I would like to nominate Ms. Carpenter to continue to serve in that role for the next year. Is there a second? Mr. Stark, discussion, comments from board members? Okay, I see none. Any other nominations? Okay, I see none. With that, all in favor of appointing Jennifer Carpenter to the role of assistant clerk for the year ending May 2025, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous 7-0. All right, move to item 8, to hear and consider any communications. Mr. Gerber, Mr. Becker, anything?
Just, yes, so, right?
Sure.
So I think to the board.
Thank you.
For Jen, she's who I also thank, and, you know, certainly, honor the work, serve the board, which I used to sit on, so. So to just, you know, and I'll work with, who, Madam Chair, over, months. Obviously, we've talked about a couple of different things that may require special meetings. I think our hope would be if they were to occur, that they view and as efficient placed as possible to keep town business moving. We do have a number of things, just, you know, offer, including grants, which are great, will obviously require acceptance. We have a lower work bonding, and coming up soon from the state. The state is bonding on it, but that's towards the lower work project. We also have one, possibly two, related to an open space trail. Got notified, actually yesterday, for about $250,000, and then another one tied to that possibly. Same, I mentioned earlier, the lake playground, that acceptance. So we have some moving items like that, but they will have some time sensitivity to them. So we'll work with the board on that. Same, hopefully we're gonna have some collective bargaining agreements that may require transfers. We can discuss timing on that, or if that can wait till September. And as mentioned, there may be an audit item, at least for a subcommittee. So as an early heads up, but I'll work with everybody on that and see what we can do. But we will be as efficient as possible. Same with the Sturgis items. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, so grants, Sturgis, purchasing policy, and see what else. All right, so yeah, it would be great if we could combine them into a meeting, but we'll.
Yeah, that's.
Again, we'll be in touch with board members. I'll be in touch. I just have one quick thing. I was delinquent in responding, but I just want to let the board know I did get a note from Mr. Testani, the Superintendent Testani, and the collective bargaining agreement between the Board of Education and the Fairfield Association of Supervisors and Administrators. So that's the Administrators Union, will expire on June 30th, 2025. And the Board of Ed and the union have to begin collective bargaining negotiations for a successor contract on or before August 5th, 2024. So as everyone knows, we've done this in the past. Connecticut general statutes require the Board of Education and the Board of Finance to meet and confer within 30 days of the start of negotiations. And that is not a public meeting or a formal meeting with any particular agenda. We probably remember, we've gone through it in the past. It's been very brief. But I'm going to reach out to board members to try to get that scheduled. So 30 days before negotiations. So that would be basically July 5th to August 4th. That we would have to do that meeting, but I believe Mr. Testani is on vacation in the latter part of July. So realistically, it would be the first half of July. So just to let everyone know, I'll be reaching out. I think we can do a very brief meeting via Zoom. And again, that is not a public meeting, but it's just to meet the requirement of the statute. So be in touch with everyone. Hopefully we can all make it. Anything else before we adjourn?
Yeah, one,
Yep.
finance related. Does anyone know when this mayhem on Villa Avenue is gonna end? I wish Bill was here because he would probably know. If you can find out, it takes 20 minutes to get to Metro from Stratfield Road.
Talking about utility work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the second time in the past year.
Yeah.
And then Bridgeport got the bright idea to do construction on the next best way. One of the days that, Vill's been closed for like 10 days
I
now.
retire, Kevin.
It's terrible.
So good.
Not anywhere near.
All right. All right, so I have motion to adjourn. Mr. Penley, seconded by Mr. Curley. All right, all in favor? Good night, everyone. Be in touch.